Yom Kippur, we forgive our families, we forgive our neighbors, we forgive our friends, and sometimes we even forgive God. We also ask for forgiveness from our families, neighbors, friends, and of course, even God. We do this because of our commandment in Leviticus, "Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." Holiness, kadosh, means to separate. We can always be more holy, to separate more from the mundane, and self-improvement and perhaps even divine improvement makes us more holy. However, while we give forgiveness and seek forgiveness, are we also able to forgive ourselves? In this same portion of Leviticus, we hear the most important commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. How, though, can we love our neighbor well if we don't love ourselves and allow ourselves to be humans first? So I must apologize at the beginning of this sermon. On Rosh Hashanah, I told a funny story to begin my argument. Today, I'm going to tell a sad one, and it's possible that it'll make everyone sad. And that, of course, is certainly not the point of the sermon, and hopefully by the end of the message I'm trying to convey will become clear. However, I wanted to let you all know, if you want to hear the funny one again after the service, I'm happy to tell it. So, as you may know, my father passed away about 1.5 years ago. However, what you don't know is that 2.5 years ago, it was my plan to try and save him by donating a kidney. This had been the plan for a couple of years. I had taken many tissue and blood matching tests, knew I was a match, and was just waiting for a time to donate. Now that took a long time for a couple of reasons. First, my father's health for the few years before his death was always poor, and he was unable to go through the surgery. Because of this, he was always a high-risk surgery. So it took a long time for a hospital to agree to actually do the transplant. However, being a physician, he was able to learn of another doctor in Baltimore who is known for doing more high-risk transplants and was actually accepted as a patient. So after a couple of months of being able to improve his health, everything seemed to align in January of 2016. Now, I had already redone all my blood and tissue tests for this hospital, as each one would require that I do that, so they knew I was already a match. And I flew out to Baltimore to meet with the surgeon of my team. As I learned, in any transplant there are 2 separate teams, one to take out and then one to put in. Now, I also met with a psychologist, and everything checked out. It was here, though, that we received the still devastating news that when they did a CAT scan of my kidneys, there were some things wrong. Enough wrong, excuse me. I actually brought a picture of my dog Fievel so I can get through this. Enough wrong that all the doctors felt it would have been unethical to leave me with 1 kidney when, for the rest of my life, I would probably need 2. Now, as you may guess, I disagreed with them. However, since they were the physicians who were known for doing the most high-risk surgeries, there was very little that I could do. In a moment of, I think, initially great hope for my father, for my family, there was a sudden turn, which forced us all to face the most likely, and as we learned, of course, the eventual death of my father. There was how I felt, with both being incredibly sad that he could die because of this, and I felt, of course, also a lot of shame and anger that I wasn't able to help him in the way he needed. When I called my father to tell him the news, he said he understood, that he loved me and it was okay. He put aside his own devastation, his own heartbreak over months of anticipating a significant step forward in battling his illness, and was there for me. Now, I won't ever forget that, and will try and emulate his response and selflessness in the future. However, at that time, and still a little today, I would not allow myself to feel the things I was feeling and have a healthier emotional response to them. I was ashamed of my feelings and just wanted to fix my father, and I was unable to forgive myself for it. Now, exploration of our feelings is very important. we hear, though, sometimes the exact opposite. Phrases perhaps as innocuous as, buck up, or no use crying over spilt milk. All the way to phrases which can be detrimental, like, you're too hysterical to take seriously, or even real men don't express their emotions. Now, this is done for a variety of reasons, but many are to speed up a process which, as I will explain, is already meant to give us a more profound and quick understanding of what to do in a situation. Emotions, what we feel, are the response to things happening in our world. Emotions are not just human, but shared by many animals, especially mammals. We can witness a dog, of course, feeling their emotions through their tail. According to Dr. Antonio Damasio, a neuroscientist, emotions were developed in a way to make understanding quicker. We don't always need to think things through when presented with perhaps an immediate danger. We just understand there is a danger and have an emotional response which gets our bodies ready to act. There is even a midrash where it is said that Moses went up to the top of Mount Sinai and understood the whole Torah, all 5 books, in the first minute he was up there. But it just took 40 days and 40 nights for him to write it down. Emotions play a very important part in our lives, and not being able to recognize that and forgive ourselves for having them, I think, can lead to some negative outcomes. This is an issue which happens, I think, in many of our lives. We have an emotional response to something, but we fear expressing it openly in our relationships, both public and private. This will then lead to an even bigger issue where we are unwilling to empathize with others. What then is the solution to this? Now, there are 2 as I see it. First comes from us as the person who is dealing with the emotions, and second comes from us when we are faced with someone expressing theirs. With this first solution, the first step is to forgive ourselves for being humans and learn why we feel the way that we do. Now, I think, as all of us know, it's impossible not to feel. However, often when we do, we are masking our true emotion with another. This may be done because we're uncomfortable with what is our actual emotion. We may not be happy that we're scared or sad, and instead lash out in anger. Now, of course, anger is a feeling, but one which does not always get to the root of our issues. In my example, I think I was sad of what was going to happen with my father and felt shame I couldn't help. So at that time, I lashed out more in anger than I think anything else. Anger, perhaps, is the most socially acceptable of the more uncomfortable emotions, sadness, shame, or fear. So we often are angry about situations which deep down we're not angry, but something else. However, understanding how we're feeling will lead to better choices. Just as when we were developing hundreds of thousands of years ago as Homo sapiens, it would not benefit us to get really angry about a lion running into our camps, but instead be fearful and either help get our families away or try and scare it off. The courage from fear will help us deal with the situation more appropriately than the anger from feeling fear, where we then sometimes go overboard and add cruelty into our response. We can understand more about the situation by knowing our uninhibited reaction. Now, I cannot predict the future, and there may be a time where a lion will come into your house, although I hope not. But today we do have other issues. Understanding our feelings on our emotions will help us understand the situation more. Now, one of the best ways to know what is at the root of our decisions is really to talk to someone. Looking deep and finding the reasons we may act the way we do, especially when we can see the actions we are taking are unhealthy to our relationships. We can make our own spaces for feeling if we'd like, but in our relationships, both public and private, we should be able to understand and express how we feel about a situation. And I think this is especially true with our partners in our relationships. Now, I do help counsel a lot of wedding couples before their marriage, and one of the most important things which I say and try to live with varying success, as you can ask Rebecca, is to express your feelings. We have this idea of being silently stoic is the best way to act during an intimate relationship. But this almost always leads to resentment. We begin to think, oh, I let my partner do this and I didn't want to. I didn't even complain about it, so I have a point and they don't have any points. Now, it sounds a little silly, but this scorekeeping can be very detrimental to these intimate partnerships. We'll get to a point where we are quite upset about something our partner may have done, which will blindside them because they've never actually heard our feelings on it. So the better we are responding to our own emotions, the better partners we can be in not just our intimate relationships, but all of our associations. And the better we can understand our partners when they express their feelings. Now this leads to the second point. The first is we need to allow and forgive ourselves for feeling. The second is that we need to allow others to feel and understand their position. We unfortunately start this rigid temperament of emotional expression for our peers very young. In this case, more mothers than fathers, I believe, are shamed, but we have all been in a situation where either our child or a friend's or a stranger's is, as we would call it, having a tantrum. Most mental health professionals for children say it is better for development and actually quicker to resolve for the child to go through their feelings. In that situation, as peers, we often both shame the child and the parent, which leads to this cycle of curtailed emotional development for the child and continued reinforcement of inhibiting emotions for the parent. As I mentioned, empathy is a great tool of understanding another situation. When we say people are emotional, when we say people are hysterical, we are dismissing their evolutionary better understanding of their situation. With this, we cannot empathize. It's not that someone's situation led to a loss of work and that is unfortunate, but that person probably deserved to be fired. It's not that these two people split up because of some things in the relationship that probably would have made myself uncomfortable as well, but perhaps one of those partners is just crazy. Or it's not that these people are trying to flee an oppressive government and try and make a better life for their families, but they're just leeches looking for handouts. What's perhaps most frustrating about all of this is most of this comes not really from a real understanding of a situation, but more from our own misunderstanding of our own feelings, preventing us from that empathy. Now, as I've said throughout the sermon, expressing and acknowledging our feelings is important. It is also important to recognize when we need help, when we're struggling and cannot cope alone. In our society, there's a tremendous stigma around mental illness and mental health counseling, but it really shouldn't be this way. We should feel empowered to go and seek help and see it not as a weakness, but as a strength that we are recognizing the problem and actually doing something about it. As Rabbi Kaznowski mentioned in a Rosh Hashanah sermon, we have mental health counselors and social workers here at the congregation. If anybody, of course, feel they need to talk. And of course, as your rabbi, both Rabbi Kaznowski and I are always here to listen. Now, I believe I'm almost at a point where I can say there was nothing I really could have done to save my father, to perhaps even forgive myself for what I was unable to do and the emotions which came with it. I recognize what I need to do to get there, and part of that process, I believe, is actually sharing this story with all of you. Not, as I said at the beginning, to make you all sad, but to rather to shine a light on the fact that we all have moments in our lives that knock us down, that make us feel as though the walls are crumbling around us. And when we do, hopefully we allow ourselves to feel, to recognize what we are going through and be okay with the emotions we need to express. And on that, when we see others in our lives suffering, we can empathize and support them fully and completely. Let us all try and know what our emotions are telling us, to allow forgiveness for ourselves to make us more holy, to be better neighbors because we are actually better to ourselves, to give space to those around us to share their feelings. And when we do this, we will realize that being emotional is the most logical thing that we can do. Gemar Chatima Tova and Shana Tova.